Hey there. Thanks for watching today's Instana training video. Today's topic is custom dashboards. So as you can see, I'm logged into an Instana environment and I'm on the Instana homepage. It's a quick reminder, we've got our selector over here where we can, jump back and forth from one screen to another. And we can always return to the home page by clicking on the Instana logo up here. When you're on the home page, you'll be able to access and create any custom dashboards by clicking on the little drop down next to the Instana logo here. As you can see, right now I have just my current built-in dashboard available, but I also have, of course, the button here where I can create dashboards. So let's take a look at that. Need to give our dashboard a name. Great, so we have now a nice big empty dashboard, and in the upper right you'll see there is an add widget button. So these are the current 5 widgets that are available to us: big number, chart, markdown, SLO, and time zones. I think for the most part you guys will be sticking on the big number or chart, so that's what I'm going to focus on today. I'm going to start with a chart. We're going to chart some of our service latencies. And so I've given it a title. We've got different chart types available to us, pretty standard stuff here, area, bar, etc. Again, I'm going to just stick with our line chart. Since I am going to chart latencies, take a look at our metric formats here. And I've got, number, percentage, bytes, etc. Since I am going to be doing latencies, I'm going to want this to be a number formatted in terms of time. And of course, the main thing is I'll need to add a metric to the chart. And so I'm going to add a metric and then select what metric I want to appear on the chart. First and most important thing that you'll want to choose for your metric is, of course, the data source. As you can see, you have a choice between our tracing data, our event data, our mobile application, and website data, with infrastructure data coming soon. I'm going to choose application data. Now this should be familiar to everybody, right? It's our filter toolbar that's currently available in our unbounded analytics feature. Hopefully you're used to it by now, but I'm going to use it to select a particular application perspective, a particular service within that application perspective. And yeah, that looks good. This is an important service for me. It's a customer-facing service. I want to have a chart of its latency. Now I need to choose the particular metric based off of our application data source. I can choose between the call data, which would be the number of calls, or our latency data, or our erroneous call data in the form of call count or erroneous call count or erroneous call rate. Again, as we already mentioned, we're going to stick with latency for this chart. Now, in terms of aggregations, I have, as you're familiar with Instana, we have our percentile data. I can stick with our mean, our min, or our max. I can look at sum, and then I've got our various percentiles available. We'll keep it simple and stick with mean today. And finally, I got a preview down here, but you'll notice that my preview is not available. It says basically that something's wrong. Handy feature. I can click on it. It'll tell me what I forgot to do. And in fact, I simply forgot to give it a label. I will call it the name of the service. So EUM front end. Now I can check my preview, and sure enough, this looks good to me. I've got my EUM front end service latency being charted. Now, one of the things we can do here that is a little bit different than our curated dashboards is we can add multiple metrics to the same chart. What I mean by it being different is that, we have a EUM front end service dashboard in our curated dashboards that, of course, includes a chart of latency. So this isn't really creating anything that I don't already have in another dashboard, but I can add another metric to this chart. I can stick with latency, mean latency, and I can choose perhaps a different service. So I will stick with our robot shop application perspective, but I'll take a different service here, payment service. Another thing we can do here is, expand in terms of our filter capabilities here, and perhaps I'm only interested in a particular endpoint of that service. So now I've got my filter set correctly. I'm going to stick with latency, stick with mean latency, And again, I've got a problem here, which I know is that I didn't give it a label. So I'm just going to put my label name in there. Let's take a look. Looks pretty good. I've got, two different services being charted on the same chart, which again is something that we don't really have in our curated dashboards. Let's go ahead, create this guy. Now, once I have a widget on my dashboard, I can move it around. I can resize it. I'm just going to make it bigger. I'll save that. Take a look, and again, we've got our two services, our EUM front and our payment service. The latencies for those two services being charted on the same chart. Awesome. Let's take a look at another capability that we have in custom dashboards. For this example, I'm going to stick with a chart. I'm going to stick with a line chart. I'll add a metric to the chart. I am again going to focus in on tracing data. I'm going to stick with our robot shop application perspective. I'm going to stick with our payment service and our post pay ID endpoint. But I'm now going to focus on call data, so the number of calls as opposed to the previous chart, which was latencies. And I'm going to label this metric current calls. And if we take a look, you can see I've got another problem here, and that's because I didn't give the entire widget a title. So I'm just going to call this payment service. Now everything looks good, except I've got a decimal point here I probably don't need. So I'll change my number or my metric format to just number without the decimal. Looks good, but let's do something really cool. I'm going to add a secondary y-axis to this chart. Again, a really nifty capability that's something that you don't really have a lot of control over in our curated dashboards. I'm going to add a metric to the chart, and in fact, I'm going to add the same filter. So again, the robot shop application perspective, payment service, post pay ID, endpoint. Now you might be wondering, well, what's the point if I'm just adding the same filter? But what I'm going to do here is I'm going to add a time shift of previous time window. I'm going to give this a name of previous calls. And now when we look at our preview, you can see I've got two lines, one for current calls and one for previous calls. I notice that I've got, again, a decimal appearing for my previous. So let's go change that number format. Boom, looks good now. Let's save that widget. Let's make it bigger. So again, you can see that I've got on a single chart, I've got time shift comparison now between the current and previous data. You'll notice in the pop-up it says last week. That's because my time is set to 7 days. If I switch it to 24 hours, you'll see now the previous is yesterday. And of course, if I were to set it at an hour, the previous would be the previous hour. So it'll just adapt to whatever time frame you have selected. So now I'm back to last week. So that's really powerful, a really powerful feature here where we can do time shift comparisons of any of our metrics. Let's add another one. I'm going to now give you an example of a big number. And I'm going to stick, in this case, with our application data. I'm actually going to stick with our payment service. Again, payment being a very important service, since it does show me whether my customers are actually purchasing products from my website. I'm going to call this chart payments. And let's take, for the metric, we're actually going to do the number of calls this time. So we have latency up here on the chart I just created. We're going to do the number of calls here. You can see that I've got a preview here. Again, I probably don't need the decimal, but that looks good. I had 345K or so payments in the current time frame. Again, let's take a look at what a time shift looks like here. I'll do previous time window again. You can see the time shift on a big number is displayed as a difference in terms of a percentage. In this case, the number of payments went down from 354,000 to 345,000. It's a decrease of 2.6%. In this case, though, when we have a decrease in the number of payments, we actually don't like that because payments are good. So I'm going to change the positive to be green and the negative to be red. So now you can see it looks like what I want. We went from, again, 354 to 345, a decrease of 2.64%. So I added that to the dashboard here. I'm going to just move it down. I'm going to make it bigger. I'm going to save it. Now what I'm going to do next is I'm going to show another capability where we can save ourselves a lot of time by duplicating existing charts. So I'm going to duplicate this guy. I'm going to just move him over a little bit. And then I'm going to edit my duplicated chart. I'm going to change this one to show failed payments. And I'm going to do that by simply adding our erroneous filter. So I saved myself a lot of time by duplicating that chart. I don't have to re-enter all this data. I can just add my call erroneous as true filter. Now you can see how many failed payments I had. But in this case, failed payments are bad. If they go up, we want that to be indicated as a problem. So I'm going to flip this to, an increase to be red, a decrease to be green. That looks good now. We'll go ahead and confirm that and save it. So you can see, I can see on my dashboard in the last week, I had a total of 345,000 payments, of which 229 failed, compared to last week where I had 354 total and 200 failures. Great. So some pretty awesome capabilities already. I'm going to show you one more. To do that, I'm going to go back to chart. I'm going to go back to line chart in this case, but I'm going to change the data source to website data. So this is our EUM data. We're going to look at page loads. We're going to stick to our Robot Shop website, our main landing page, and we are going to look at on-load time. So again, this is similar to service latencies that we did before, but now we're looking at website data. Let's take a look. We still got a missing title here. Let's take a look now. It looks good. We've got our on-load time again. Probably don't need that decimal there, and actually we want to show it as time. It looks better now. Notice how the preview really helps me speed up here. I don't have to keep creating it and then editing it. I can, manipulate it before I save it. Perfect. Let's add a secondary y-axis, and let's actually add in the call data. So we're going to stick with websites, but now we're going to go to stick with the same filter first of all, same page. But now we're gonna do page loads instead of on load time. So what we're doing here is we're combining two completely different metrics on the same chart. So one's a time metric, right? On load time metric. The other one is a count metric. So we're going to change this guy to get rid of our decimal. So I've got two completely different metrics on the same chart. One again measured in time, the other measured in count. Something that we don't really do on our curated dashboards very much. Again, you can do this to your heart's content on a custom dashboard. Another thing I can do here is I've got them both as line charts. Let's go ahead and change the count metric to a bar chart. So now you can see I've got not only two different metric types, time and count, but two different chart types on the same chart. I can create that chart. I can make it bigger. I can save it. Awesome. Now let's say that I just logged into Instana. I would be looking at our default dashboard here, but I would have the ability through my drop-down to flip over to my custom dashboard, where again I've demonstrated some cool new capabilities, the combination of different metric types and chart types on the same chart, the combination of multiple entities on the same chart, a time shift on a single chart, and time shift on big numbers, as well as some differences in using our filtering to show failed versus total. Lastly, I will just point out that you can always share your dashboards, make them public. Once you make them public, you can assign editors, or of course you can leave it private. And you have some other options here where you can put them in TV mode and make it your default, etc. So that's it for my custom dashboard demo today. As always, I hope it was helpful. Please reach out to us if you've got any further questions.